Hey guys, get ready, because in this video we're going to build a scroll saw project from pattern to the finished project, all finished up. We're going to build this initial frame. If you've been following me over on my blog, you know that a few weeks ago I finally retired from a 37-year-long career. And that retirement has given me a lot of extra time to work out here in the shop and to spend more time working on the blog. One of the things I really always wanted to do are more YouTube videos, just simply because they're fun to do and people seem to enjoy them. Some of the videos have had hundreds of thousands of views, and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to try to do a few different types of videos, and I won't promise how often I'll get them out. My goal is once a week. We'll see if I can maintain that or not. They take a lot of time, but they're fun to do. I'm going to do a few different types of videos. I'm going to do a video tonight where we just take a random pattern, or not so random, I actually chose it, out of my free online catalog, and we're going to build that product here in this video. That should be a lot of fun. I also want to do product reviews, tutorials, different types of information on these videos. So if you enjoy this, just let me know over on my email and the blog, and give me some ideas on what you'd like to see, and we'll see if we can have some fun out here in the Scroll Saw Workshop. Okay, the first thing you need to do before we get started on this project is to go download the pattern, and I will put the URL for the pattern in the description below, or you can go over to my blog and find it in the online catalog. Just type in initial in the search box and you'll be able to pick it up real quick. In this case, it is an initial frame that you can hang on your front door or wherever you want, and it comes in two pages. The one page is the initial, the other page is a backer board. Now you don't have to cut this backer board. I'm going to do it tonight just because it's part of the pattern, but if all you want is just to hang the initial up, you can just cut out this first page. You are also going to need a couple of boards, and I'm going to use two contrasting boards. I'm going to use some Peruvian walnut, and this is just some kind of nasty looking maple actually, but anyway, I'm going to use this for the initial frame. These boards need to be about 12 inches long and at least 7 inches wide. So in this case I'm using 1/4 inch thick wood. If you just cut the frame, you could, or the initial in the frame, you could cut it out a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, whatever you want. But in this case, I'm going to use a backer, and I don't want it to get too thick, so I'm going to use two 1/4 inch boards. The next step I want to do is I'm going to cut these patterns down a little bit so they're not quite so large. We don't need all this extra paper attached to the board, so I'm just going to cut them out probably within a 1/2 inch to the border of the pattern. And I'm going to do that on both the frame and the backer board. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach these patterns to these pieces of wood with spray adhesive. It can be a low tack or a high tack depending on how you use the adhesive, but we're going to put it on to where it doesn't tack so tight that we can't get it off. Another thing that I always do is I use blue painter's tape underneath the pattern. So what I'll do is I'll take my board, I'll cover it in blue painter's tape, wherever the pattern is going to sit, and then I'll glue the pattern down onto the blue painter's tape. Now, one of the reasons we do that is because the glue in the tape actually lubricates the blade, and that makes the blades last longer and it makes them cut easier. Now on this thin stock like this, it's not that critical because this is going to cut like butter anyway. Not going to be a big deal. But the next advantage you have is if you do apply a little bit too much glue and the pattern doesn't want to come up, all you have to do is peel the tape up. The blue painter's tape is a low tack and it'll come right up. So that's the next thing we're going to do. We're going to put the blue painter's tape on the boards. Usually what I'll do is I'll just take my pattern and lay it down on the board and just see how much of this board I need to cover. In this case you can see I've got an extra wide board. It just happened to be the size I had handy. So I'm going to cover this board pretty much just where the pattern is going to be. So I'm going to take the blue painter's tape, get it started here. I'm going to start over here on this edge, and generally what I'll do is I'll put it down and then just tear it off on the end. You want to flatten it out before you do this rip. Sometimes it won't work as well if you don't. And you can see we've got some overhang on this end, but that's okay. We'll tack that in, or wrap that underneath the bottom of the board once we get done here. And I think we'll do one more piece just to make sure we've got it all covered. Now sometimes when you put this blue painter's tape on and you actually take these pieces and wrap them under like this, what will happen is these pieces will come undone while you're doing your scroll work and they'll kind of catch. So you want to make sure you tack this down pretty good on the back just so it doesn't come loose. Okay, there's the painter's tape on that board. Now let's go ahead and do the painter's tape over here on the piece of maple we've got. This will be the piece that we actually apply the frame to that we're going to cut. Same thing, we're just going to tack it down, rip it off. There are a lot of scrollers out there who don't use tape. I like it because I've used it for years and I find that it absolutely makes the blade cut smoother and gives you a better cut. So I have always used it and will continue to use it. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. If you're cutting in cherry or some types of wood that want to burn real easily, the painter's tape will also help prevent that burning on the edge of the wood where the blade heats up. The glue again will keep the blade cool and keep that from happening. Okay, we got both of our boards taped up. Now we're going to spray them and get them affixed to the pattern affixed to the boards. A couple things to point out here are that I have a slide out drawer underneath my workbench that I pull out to use as my glue table. And what I do is I just apply or put the paper down on this, and you can see it was kind of hard to pull up because the pull out because the glue is starting to dry around the rails. But I always have some type of table that I can pull out to put my paper on face side down, and then I use in this case I'm using a 3M general purpose 45 spray adhesive. This works fine, almost any of them work fine. You generally want to buy the ones that are kind of low tack, but if you're using the blue painter's tape it really doesn't make any difference. So I'm going to shake it up here a little bit and spray the back of my pattern. And you don't have to coat it real good. It just needs to be coated enough to make it stick to the tape. Okay, we're going to take our pattern, in this case the backer board part of the pattern, and we're going to apply it to our darker wood. We want that lighter wood to really stand out, so we're going to do the backer board in this Peruvian walnut. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other half of the pattern, and then we'll head over to the drill press and drill our entry holes. I'm over here at my drill press. I want to show you a couple things of what I do to drill these entry holes. First of all, I use a 1/16 inch drill bit. Some people like to drill larger holes because it's easier to get the blade through, but I leave the 1/16 in there simply because some of the fretwork you're going to be cutting, the holes are going to have to be that small to fit into the fretwork. In this case, none of them, but maybe one, really need to be that small, but I just keep it in there all the time. That way I don't have to change them out. The other thing I always do is I have a backer board here on my drill press so it doesn't blow out the back of the pattern so well. So that's a good idea. If your drill press just has a steel table, with a hole in it, I still recommend that you put a piece of board down that you can drill into. A piece of MDF or anything will work fine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start drilling these entry holes, and I'm going to kind of strategically place them where I think they need to be. If you start on the edge of a pattern and you bring your blade into it, it's a little more difficult to hide that starting point than if you can start in a corner. So most of the time I'm going to drill these entry holes right at a corner point. And I'll get a little closer here and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm back over here at my workbench and I've got all the entry holes drilled. The first thing I want to do is just take a minute to make sure that I didn't miss any entry holes. A lot of times you'll get back over to your scroll saw and you'll find that you've missed one and you got to get back up and go to work again. In this case, I don't see any that I'm missing, but I do want to point out how I did these entry holes to just make it double clear what I was talking about a minute ago. You can see that this entry hole I drilled right at this intersection. At this one and this one, who are, they're obviously the same on each side. I started them right at the end of this cutout because I can actually taper these holes away to make sure the entry holes aren't seen after the pattern's cut. All these, I got them close to a point. This one's close to a point. Same thing here, here, here. Every place you can see an entry hole, there's an intersection between two lines where I can cover up the start and stop of the scroll saw blade. I do see one error on this pattern, and I'm going to fix it while I'm cutting it. But after I get this video all edited and uploaded, I'll make the change in the pattern before you download it. These two decorations right here that swing around, they're not connected to this piece right here, and that's going to make them very, very fragile. So when I cut, I'm actually going to extend this cut up into the rest of this pattern, and like I said, when I get done, I'll make sure I edit the pattern so that that's not the case when you download it. So now we've got everything ready. We've got both boards, got the pattern applied to them, we've got all the entry holes drilled. Now we're ready to go to the scroll saw. Okay, I'm over here at my scroll saw now. Today we're going to be cutting this project on the Excalibur EX21 scroll saw. This is a great machine. I've had it for a few years now and never had any trouble out of it at all. I also have a couple of DeWalt DW788s over there, and one of these days soon in the video we'll do some cutting on those saws too, so you can get a feel for how they work. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and cut the backer board out first. It'll be a pretty easy cut because basically we just have two interior cuts to make. After I get this one cut out, I'll come back and we'll do the initial frame, and for that I'll try to get an overhead shot where you can actually see me cutting a little better. But in this case, let's just jump in here and cut this backer board. For this cut, I already have a number 3 scroll saw blade in the machine. I'm just going to use that. It's just a 1/4 inch thick material, so it's not going to slow me down that much. If this board were any thicker or any denser of wood, I'd probably change this out to a number 5 blade. I am also using a scroll reverse blade, and what that does is the reverse teeth actually help prevent splintering on the back of the board, and takes away a little bit of the sanding you have to do. I don't use a magnifying lamp to cut. My eyes haven't quite deteriorated to that point yet. I do have a magnifying glass here with a lamp on it, but I just use it for the lamp right now. Maybe one of these days soon I'll have to actually start using the magnifying glass. Right now I'm just cutting out the holes that will allow somebody to put a ribbon through this backer board. So they can, once they put the initial frame on it, they can hang it up. And one of these videos soon I'll go back over again how to scroll circles and stay pretty accurate so they look good when you get done. There's certain parts of scrolling that has to be very accurate, and other parts that don't need to be quite so accurate. If you're cutting out a leaf, it's a natural shape and nobody's going to know if you make a mistake here or there. If you're cutting out what needs to be a perfect circle, then obviously it's a much more important, because the human eye is going to pick up the irregularities in that circuit very quickly. So in this case I'm cutting out these hanger holes, and I want to stay pretty accurate if I can. In this case they're so small that it won't be a huge deal if I'm a little bit off. But basically you want to try to stay on the pattern line as well as you can in this particular situation anyway. Okay, there's our 2 hanger holes cut out. Now again, I did go ahead and drill an entry hole even on the outside of the pattern, just simply because I like to start inside the board instead of coming in from the edge. It just keeps the board more solid as you're doing your cutting. Now, some people cut in one direction and some people cut in the other. I tend to always cut in a counterclockwise direction. So I'm going to come into this corner right here and then cut all the way around this pattern. My table needs to be waxed. I'm having a little hard time moving this board across this table. if you do happen to get off the pattern line, don't panic and don't try to immediately jump back onto the line. Do a gradual movement to move yourself back into the line, and it'll be much easier to cover up with sanding when you get the project done. Another thing that I'll mention while I'm thinking about it, this pattern would actually be easier to cut right now if I had cut off this extra part of the board that we don't need. It actually is making me have to turn a larger board, and the smaller it is, the easier it is to get your hands in place to make the turns. So I should have cut it down smaller. I may have forgot to mention, but anytime you're working on the scroll saw, you really ought to use a dust mask. I keep it hanging right here next to my saw. In this case, I didn't put it on because, you know, I need to be able to talk to you. But especially with exotic woods, you don't want that dust in your lungs. So go ahead and get you a decent dust mask, you know, that can keep these small pieces of dust that are flying around out of your face. Let me move the camera up here just a little bit, and then I'll show you something else. Back here in the back behind my scroll saw, I've got a small shop vac air cleaner, and normally I would turn that on, and as I'm blowing the dust away, it goes back into that air cleaner, and it also circulates the air in the shop and helps quite a bit. I also have an air conditioner over here to my left, and a lot of times I'll turn that on while I'm cutting, and I'll have it coming over my left hand shoulder, which blows the dust back away from my face. So putting a fan behind you and blowing that dust away to you into an air cleaner can really help. Okay, let's continue making this cut on this backer board. My daughter is actually getting married later this year, and the reason I picked out this particular initial to do was because this will be her name once she gets married. It will start with an S. So I'm actually cutting this pattern. I'm going to give it to my daughter if it turns out okay. So that's how I chose this pattern. When you download the pattern book for these initials, of course all the initials will be in the pattern book. You just have to scroll to the one you want and print that page out, and then you can make your cuts. This has actually been a really exciting year for me because, like I said earlier, I retired a few weeks ago, and I retired from Xerox Corporation, and I've been there 37 years. So I was ready to leave. Things had changed over the years, and I'd done it so long that I just wasn't enjoying the work very much anymore. It was a good job. The company was really good to me over the years, but it was just time to move on, and I really wanted to spend more time out in the workshop and working on my blog. So that's my plans for the next however many years that I can be out here. That's what I plan to do. Of course, I also have my wife making plans for me too. So as you can imagine, if you're already retired, you already know this. The honey-do list gets larger once she knows that you don't have to get up and go to work every day. So I've been doing quite a bit of things around the house, working on some projects that I never seemed to have time to do when I was working. We worked a lot of late hours in the job I had, so a lot of times I would be out, you know, all night long or close to it, and then the way we worked, we were on call one day out of every 5 in a rotation, and basically we worked 24 hours that day if we had calls up. So I would do that, and as I got older, it took me longer to recover from those long nights. So now it's really nice to actually wake up in the morning and feel good that I've got a good night's sleep. I don't miss it. Okay, we're just about to come back to the place I started, and that piece is done. Now I can release the tension on my blade and get this piece out, blow the dust away. There's the backer board cut. Now we'll move the camera and get a little better overhead shot, and we'll do the initial frame. We're ready to cut out the initial frame now, And normally I start out with the interior cuts first and then I cut out the exterior. In this case, just to make the video a little easier to see when I zoom in here, I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this board out of the way, and that way you'll be able to see the shape. I also, that blade that I had in the machine was getting pretty old, so I decided I'm going to put a new blade in, and I'll show you that in just a second. So we're going to get a new blade in here, set our tension up, and then we'll cut out the exterior. The way I install a scroll saw blade, in this case I'm using the Flying Dutchman blades, and this is a number 3 scroll reverse blade, and the Ultra scroll reverse that they sell actually has a little dimple on one end of the blade, and that's really handy because you can just pick it up and very quickly know which end goes up. So in this case the dimple goes up, and of course the teeth need to face you. Now the way I insert a scroll saw blade, and again it doesn't really matter how you do this as long as you get it in there, but I'm just going to show you the way I do it in case you're new. I go ahead and take and put the upper blade in the clamp it down so it's just hanging here. Then I go ahead and insert the blade through the hole in the table and make sure this is pushed down pretty good, and then I reach underneath and tighten the bottom clamp, and that way when I bring this back up, now when I bring it down, I know I'm going to be able to get good tension on it. So I'm going to go ahead and start this exterior cut here. And again, I'll cut in a counterclockwise direction, and we'll see if we can get this exterior cut done. Alright, I've got the scroll saw set on a pretty slow speed. Generally I cut most projects at the highest speed I can. The thinner the wood I use, the more I slow it down. So in this case, I've got it down to about half of its normal speed. So let's go ahead and start this cut and see how we do. I'm coming in on that point, and I'm making my turn right at that point. Then I should be able to hide that entry point when I come back around. And I don't know if you can see this if I'm close enough, but I'm actually off the line on the outside, and so I'm slowly coming back to get myself centered back on that line again. If I had made a real sharp turn, it would have been very obvious that I made a mistake there. So anytime you're making a mistake, you know, take your time, slow your cut down, and slowly get back onto the pattern line. And if you make a mistake on the outside of the pattern line, it's pretty easy when you get done to sand it and fix those mistakes. And when you're cutting a pattern, this is not a very complicated pattern, so it's not going to take us that long to cut it anyway, so there's no reason to get in a hurry. Enjoy the process. I'm a slow cutter, and the reason I am is because I don't have to be in a hurry. I'm not a production cutter. I'm not cutting these pieces and I'm going to make 100 of them. If you're actually going to do production cut, then yes, you need to learn to cut a little faster. But if you're just enjoying this as a hobby, why get in a big hurry? Take your time. Like I was saying earlier, my daughter's getting married later this year, so I've got a few projects that I've got to make for the wedding. I always do, for everybody in the family, I do a reception box where people can drop gift cards and notes and stuff to the bride and groom. And so sometime later this year we'll be building that project, and it's always a lot of fun. And I plan to do a video on that, but I probably won't obviously release the video until after the wedding. And I don't know if you just noticed there, but I came to a transition point, and some people will get to that point and they'll try to nibble away and make that turn, and you don't have to do that. You can actually turn the board pretty quickly at those transition points. So if you need to make a sharp point, don't sit there and do this. You'll see some people, they'll back up and they'll do this until they get a hole there big enough for the blade to turn in. And you don't have to do that. You can see when I get down to this transition point right here, just spin the board around. It'll take a little bit of practice, but you'll pretty soon get to the point where you can stop that blade right where you want it to stop. These initial patterns seem to be pretty popular right now. If you go on Etsy or some of those places, you see a lot of people that are making these initial patterns to hang on doors and different things like that in the bedroom or whatever. Normally, if you're going to hang them on a door, they're a little bigger than this. I always make my patterns designed to where they'll fit on an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper, and then you can actually enlarge the patterns before you cut them if you want them bigger. This one could easily be cut twice the size it is and would look fine. Once I get this exterior cut, we'll zoom in a little bit and get a little better, hopefully a little better angle for you to actually see the cut. Probably shouldn't let you see them any better poorly as I'm cutting tonight. That's another thing you're going to find. The scroll saw takes a little bit of practice, but it's not terribly hard to learn. But you will have nights when you'll come out in the shop and it seems like every cut you make is going wrong. Don't worry about it. These are handmade gifts, and nobody expects them to be perfect. If they look too perfect, they don't look handmade. So if you make a mistake here or there, no big deal. A lot of mistakes you can sand away, and the other mistakes you can usually use glue to fix them. So if you break something, don't get mad and throw the project across the room. Just figure out how to fix it. And in this case, the mistakes I'm making, like I said, I'm coming back in and fixing my mistakes very slowly to get back to the pattern line. So by the time I get this cut out and take the pattern off, you probably won't even notice those mistakes. It won't be a big deal. So there's the exterior cut. Let's get rid of this waste wood, and I'm going to get a little better angle on the camera here, and then we'll come back in and cut all these interior cuts. Okay, I'm ready to start my interior cuts, and I hope I've got the camera at a little better angle where you can see it. Again, when I do these interior cuts, I generally do the smaller cuts first, and then I'll work my way out to the bigger ones. Again, it just keeps the wood stronger as you're cutting. So I'm going to find an entry hole to start with. In this case, I'll just go right to the top, and we'll make this first interior cut, and then we'll move on from there. I'm using a foot switch. You can't see it down here below the table. You've probably noticed that I haven't been reaching up here and touching the on-off switch, and that's because I highly recommend that everyone use a foot switch. Just makes life so much easier. You want to buy the dead man style foot switch, and what that means is the saw starts when you touch the switch with your foot, and it keeps running until you take your foot off of the switch. So it makes it very easy to start and stop the cut. What you just saw there is the blade actually slipped out of the upper clamp on the blade holder, and what happens a lot of times, since we've got this going on, I'll just take this apart and show you. These thumb screws that actually clamp the blade against the set screw on this side, they will wear out. This point right here will wear out to the point where the blades start slipping out of them. When they wear out, sometimes you can take a piece of sandpaper and rough them up a little bit. You do want to try to keep this piece as flat as possible so it clamps in every direction the same. If it's at an angle, it won't clamp on half of the threads, and it won't work right. So in this case, that's what happened. It actually slipped out of the clamp. Obviously, what can happen is the blade will break, but in this case, that didn't happen. It just slipped. What did happen when the blade slipped, let me get a better angle here, is this was the bottom blade where it was clamped into the bottom, and when the upper blade slipped out, the upper arm actually hit the top of the blade and put a kink in it. So that blade's gone. Gonna have to get a new one. Okay, we got the new blade in. Let's see if we can finish this first interior cut without any more problems. If the blade does continue to slip out of that upper clamp, then I'll probably have to stop and either put a new upper clamp in it or try to sand it and put a little more grit to the tooth. One thing I just did there that you may have saw is as I finished this cut, the piece was still setting down into the cutout. And what I did is I backed up the blade, twisted it just a little to where the teeth grabbed this piece and knocked it out of the cutout. That's something that after you've been cutting for a while, you'll be able to get down, and I don't know if it really helps that much, but gets the pieces out of your way. Okay, ready for the next interior cut. And we'll just move through these pretty quick, and I'll probably edit some of this out again, and if I think of something that I need to pass along to you, I'll let you know. But right now, we're just working through all of our interior cuts. This project probably takes, I don't know, an hour to cut if you weren't sitting here talking like I am. Not a terribly difficult pattern, not that many small interior cuts, and definitely nothing too fragile. Here's another thing that I can talk about for a second. In scrolling, you have some people that will thread the blade from the top down into the bottom clamp. And the reason they do that is because it's easier to see the hole to get it started. Other people are what they call bottom feeders, and they actually put the board over the top of the blade and put it down. I do agree that feeding from the top is easier. I started out as a bottom feeder, and so that's just a habit I'm into. I find it a little bit harder to clamp the blade on the bottom than to clamp it on the top, so that's the other excuse I use for why I feed from the bottom. It does make it harder though when you're getting ready to do a cut, especially if it's a bigger project. It's a little harder to get it twisted up and get the blade started through that hole. And that's why some people use larger drill bits when they can, because it just makes that whole process easier. Okay, we're coming up to a transition here, and I want to show you something. I showed you earlier that once I get to that transition, I can spin the board real quick. No matter how quick you spin that board, you still can't get a perfect point there. So if it's a place where you really need that to be a nice sharp point, what you can do is back the blade back up out of the cut, come back in, and come in from the other side of that point like that, and that will actually cut that piece out. And then we can continue on around with the pattern and have a nice sharp point. Now I can just, with the blade turned off, I can actually come back into that point, come back out of it, and we'll have a very sharp point there. In this case, it probably wasn't ultra critical that we have that sharp point, but just a note there for you. I want to show you something I keep by my scroll saw all the time, and that's this little air blower. It's called the DataVac electric duster, and it's a 110 powered air can is what it is. And as the dust builds up around my scroll saw, especially when I have my shop dust cleaner on over there, I just take this blow the dust away a little bit, and then I'm ready to go start cutting again. I want to point out something here that can be pretty important, especially if you want the project to look really nice. I have a very small interior cut to make here. It's probably no more than 1/4 of an inch long and 1/16 of an inch wide. When I drilled the entry hole, it's kind of like a teardrop shape. And when I drilled the entry hole, I drilled the hole on the rounded end of the teardrop. And the entry hole at that point is about as wide as the pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start my blade on the edge of that entry hole and actually taper this thing away down to the point so you won't see the evidence of the entry hole after we get done cutting. So what I'm talking about is I'm going to start the blade, push it up against the edge of that entry hole, and then pretend like that's the rounded edge of the teardrop. I'll go down to that point, bring the blade back, and do just the opposite on the other side of the teardrop. Then I can come down to that point, and now we get a nice cut that you can't tell that there was an entry hole there. If you do leave a little bit of a nub there, you can always use the side of your blade to come back in and kind of just scrub anything you missed away. So use kind of the edge of the blade and the teeth to scrub those nubs away. And that goes for any time, like say if you had to start your cut right here and you went in and started cutting, when you came back you left a little nub there, you can use kind of the edge of the teeth to actually sand that away. I just started on the final interior cut of this project, and before I finish up here I just wanted to mention a couple other things. This particular type of project, I'm cutting it out of maple and Peruvian walnut, but you could easily cut this pattern out of something less expensive like Baltic birch plywood. As woodworkers, we generally are out looking for boards that have very beautiful grain patterns in them. And in the scroll saw world, because we cut so much of the wood away, the grain doesn't really show up that much anyway. More than grain, we look for color of the wood. We look for contrasting colors and that for our projects. So in this case, you could easily cut this out of Baltic birch plywood. And if you were selling them on a place like Etsy or at an arts and crafts show or whatever, most of those people that buy this type of project, they're not looking for that beautiful grain, and they probably won't even know the difference. A lot of times these initials are painted black when they're cut out at a larger size and hung on a door. And definitely, if you're going to cut it, you don't want to use some exotic hardwood. It's just not, it's not the thing to do. So if you want to do a less expensive version of this, just get yourself some Baltic birch plywood. Another thing I want to talk about, when I first started cutting this pattern out, my accuracy wasn't very good. And as I went along into the pattern, I started getting more accurate, and that made me think about something I should have mentioned earlier. And like any skill, it's always a good idea to warm up before you actually start. So in this case, if we had a very nice piece of wood here, we wouldn't want to make a lot of mistakes. So it'd be a good idea to warm up a little bit before you started and get your accuracy a little better. If at all possible, you want to actually start practicing or warming up on the same size, species, and thickness of wood, because different wood species will cut differently, and obviously different thicknesses will cut differently. So if you have a piece of this that you can cut off, it can be very small. Just draw yourself some circles on it or some straight lines and just practice a little bit before you get started, and you'll be less likely to make a mistake that'll make you lose a nice piece of wood. So with that, I'm just about finished here, so I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting this last interior cut, and then we'll go back over to the workbench, and we'll talk a little bit about removing the pattern and finishing it. There's another thing I can talk about a little bit. One of the reasons that I do the smaller interior cuts first and then work my way up to the bigger cuts is as this board gets more pieces of it cut away, it gets more fragile. And if it's very fragile, if you grab this piece like right here on this edge, let's say right here, and push, you may break this piece. So as you're cutting, try to keep your hands on the more solid part of the wood. That's another reason why I changed the pattern right here a little bit as I cut, because I knew this was going to be a very fragile piece, and I was going to have a tendency to, want to grab it and snap it off. So pay a little attention to where your hands are. In this case, I'm laying my hand down here, but I'm not putting hardly any pressure right here, and I'm definitely not pushing against this part with any pressure. I'm actually doing most of the turning with this hand, and this hand is kind of just a guide. Now again, I'm down to a point where I would rather have a pretty sharp point right there at the bottom of that is. So I'm going to back the blade up into the cut, into the curve, and come back down the other side. And in this case, I would kind of like to get a nice sharp point there. So I'm going to bring it in, finish that cut. Now I can go back, pop that piece out, and start back up. Now, when you get ready to come back up into this cut, you might have to go a little bit slow to get the blade started back in there, because you don't want to show any more transition than you have to. So as you can see, I'm just kind of nibbling away and getting it started. I didn't do a very good job there because I'm talking, but you get the idea. I do these videos, and again, I'm going to try to put out one a week if I can. Not sure if I'll accomplish that, but that's the goal. I'll be trying to bring different techniques and different lessons to each video that I can. Of course, some of it's going to get a little repetitive, but I'll try to add new stuff every time. So there's our last cut. We can actually take this piece off the saw now, and we can move over to the workbench, and we'll do a little sanding and clean this up and start putting it together. We're back over at the workbench now, and the next step was we need to get the tape off of these cutouts. And because I applied the blue painter's tape before I glued the pattern to it, that should make it a little easier to come off. Now, sometimes because the tape is in strips, it'll come off in strips, but once you get it started, it's definitely easier than getting just the glue from the pattern off. So let's start taking this off. And you can see that actually the pattern's coming off of the tape because I didn't really over apply the glue. So the pattern's peeling off before the tape in this case. But the other thing is we don't have the glue residue on the board that we have to worry about cleaning off with the spray adhesive. The blue painter's tape is such a low tack that the glue doesn't seem to cause any problems or leave a residue on the board. So it's actually easier. And in this case, I'm just taking my time and getting the tape peeled up. And obviously on this piece, it's going to be a lot easier because we don't have any cutouts. But you can see that it's all coming off pretty well. And maybe the next time we do one of these videos, I will apply the pattern without using the blue painter's tape. And I'll get a really good fix from the pattern onto the wood, and then I'll show you some tricks on how to get the pattern off if you do get it glued down. One thing about this blue painter's tape is it's really kind of expensive. If you buy the 2.5 inch or 2 inch wide roll, it costs a few dollars to buy even just a single roll. Now of course it goes pretty far, so that helps. But if you don't have the money to put out for this blue painter's tape, you can use even just a glue stick in the pattern. But sometimes the pattern is going to be harder to get off. And like I said, the next time we do one of these videos, I'll show you some tricks to get the glue off, make it a lot easier than just trying to peel it off or to sand it off. I've seen some people try to actually sand the pattern off of the wood, and boy does that make a mess. If you're doing it that way, stay tuned for the next video and I'll make your life a lot easier. And we're getting down here to this finer fretwork, and we just about got it all off here. And then we'll move on to doing a little sanding on this, and I'll show you the back of it here in a minute. Okay, let's get this off here real quick. We had a little bit of tear out on the back. Now again, I was using the scroll reverse blades, so that did cut down on the tear out on the back of the project. But we still did have a little bit of tear out, and I'll show you how I sand that off, and then you can decide if you like that technique or you want to try something different. One more piece of tape here. Okay, now the way this pattern is going to go together is these two holes right here are the hangers, and you're going to take the top of the initial that we cut out and center it inside this board. And when I get ready to glue it on, I'll center it a little better. But it's going to look something like that. Once we get a finish on it, it'll look pretty nice. Again, when you glue this on, you're going to want to center this up real good. If you decided that you did not want to use the backer board and just make the initial, you could use these two slots right here to put your ribbon in to hang it up. And as you can see, this would look pretty nice, especially if it was like double this size hanging on a front door. Okay, we got everything ready to go here. Let's go look at how I sand these. This might be a little hard to see here in the camera, but around the edges where we made our cuts, the reverse side has a little bit of tear out on it, what we call the fuzzies, and we want to get rid of that. And you can hand sand that out of there. It's not that hard. Some of the smaller pieces of fretwork, it gets a little more difficult. So I use what's known as a sanding mop. Now, my sanding mop is attached to a tool called the sand flea, and it's a pretty expensive tool, so you may not want to go that route, but I was lucky enough to acquire one a few years ago, so I like to use it. You can install these sand mops right on your drill press, or you can even put them in a hand drill if you want to. They're just a little harder to use that way. So I'm going to go over to my sand mop, and we're going to slowly and very delicately sand the back of this project. This is my sand flea, and I don't want to talk too much about this tool tonight because I've done a review on it before. But what I want to talk about is this sanding mop that I've got attached to it. Now you can buy these mops in different grits, And I usually get like a medium grip, because basically what I'm usually doing with it is either rounding over the edges to ease them a little bit, or to try to get these fuzzies off here. Now when you start this off, it's going to start spinning this direction, and these mop brushes are fairly delicate, so they're not as likely to grab your pattern and pull it out, or your project and pull it out of your hand. But if when you're doing this, you get the top edge of this underneath this mop, it will kick it out from your hand, so you have to be pretty careful there. When I start this up, you're going to see that I'm going to place my hand behind it and just gently, go around these edges, and I'm talking very gently, just enough to take that little bit of fuzz off. It's going to get a little noisy, so I'm not going to talk through this procedure here. I'm not going to get too carried away with it, because I don't want to break this in the middle of this video. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish this up with some hand sanding back over at the workbench. Back over here at the workbench, and I want to get the rest of the fuzzies off this. So I'll usually take a piece of sandpaper and cut it down into a pretty small square when I'm doing this delicate sanding on the back of this. And most of the time I'll take the piece and I'll actually fold it over on itself like this. And then I can come in and start taking off the rest of these fuzzies by hand. And you want to get as much of these off as you can. You want this piece to look nice. So take a little bit of time here. Sanding is always the worst part of almost any project, because it's always so time consuming. And that's why I have a lot of mechanical or not hand tools to do this sanding, because sanding things by hand is often a real pain and not the most pleasant part of building a project. So I'm going to spend a little time here sanding this down. And again, when you get into these little small areas, you can even take and fold these down into smaller pieces to get up in there. And as we go on in these videos, I'll show you some other tools you can use and make to make this sanding a lot easier. I've got everything sanded down pretty well, as good as I'm going to get it, and I'm going to go ahead and glue these two pieces together. Now again, if you're only cutting out the frame, you're basically done other than applying a finish to it. So I'm going to glue these together, and when you get the glue on the back of it, you probably could just lay a heavy weight on top of this to hold it down until it dries. I'll probably use a couple of spring clamps just to make sure it doesn't move on me. So let's put a little bit of glue on the back of this, and at this point you do want to make sure that you don't put it together backwards. So make sure you get the top of the S at the top and the bottom of the S at the bottom, and point in the right direction and all that stuff. These fonts are a little bit fancy, so sometimes it can be kind of hard to know exactly how it's going to go. Now I'm not going to go crazy with the glue here. I'm just going to put a little bit around these thicker parts and then around the edges. These modern glues are so strong that it doesn't take all that much to make it hold. So just a little bit, just some dabs around these outer rings, and then we'll put it together. And if we get a little bit of squeeze out, we can clean it up, but you don't want to get any more squeeze out than you have to, especially on these dark woods like this Peruvian walnut. It's so dark that any glue spots are definitely going to show up. So you do have to be a little careful, and strategically put it in places like this piece right here that kind of hangs out in nowhere land. Get a little bit of glue on that, because we want it to hold down so it doesn't break off if somebody grabs it. So again, I'm just gently going to put some glue around the edges here. Let's see, one there to hold those pieces on, one there, just a little bit more up here. Now I'm probably going to take my finger and spread this around a little bit, trying to be careful to not get it too far off the edges. And when we get ready to put this on the backer board, if you are making the backer board, we do want to be careful to get it, centered up real well. So I'm going to do that now. And let's see how we do it. I'm going to turn this around so the top's at the top for me. And I get the bottom at the bottom. And I'm carefully, let me get some of this glue that's squeezed out off. And I'm carefully going to put this down and line it up. And I think that's pretty close right there. Got a little bit of squeeze out, but nothing that I don't think we can clean up. And I am going to let that tack up a little bit before I try to put these clamps on it, because those clamps will definitely make it want to move a little bit. So we have to be kind of careful. Now when you do get this squeeze out, don't try to clean it off right now. Let's let it dry, and then we'll take it off with an X-Acto knife. That's usually a little easier way to do it. I think while this tacks up, I am going to lay a weight on it, and I do want to be careful that it doesn't move while I put this weight on it. So I'm just going to put it right across the middle here. That'll give me time and the opportunity to straighten it back up. Yeah, I think we're okay. So I'm just going to let that tack up, and then we'll put a little clamp pressure on it for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'll be back and we'll finish this thing up. Okay, the glue's had plenty of time to dry now. I did take my X-Acto knife and go in and cut out the excess glue that is squeezed out a little bit. And again, I just waited for the glue to dry, and I went in with my X-Acto knife and just cut the hardened glue away. So we'll get the clamps off of this, and the next thing I usually do is apply a little finish to it. So we'll do that now. Now I'm going to go over to my Lazy Susan where I do this. I'm just going to spray a spray lacquer on it. I'm not going to get too crazy with the finish, but I'm going to put a spray lacquer on this, and I'm not going to video that because it's too hard to get the camera over there. But as soon as I get the finish on it, we'll come back over here and finish up. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, please click the like and subscribe button below. It really helps me out. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video, and we'll see you next time here at the Scroll Saw Workshop.